All right, everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining. My name is Nick DiTullio with Colorado Nonprofit Association. My pronouns are he, him, his. Welcome to Grit Training and Resilience. Today, this is presented by Nicole Weis and Mary Ellen Benson. And before I pass it off to them, I'd like to mention a couple things. We are in meeting format, as you see, so feel free to share your video. We'd love to see you. We will keep you initially muted just for background noise purposes, but feel free, if you have any questions, to type them into the chat. I'll be collecting them and keeping an eye on them. And then towards the end, we will have a section for the chats to be answered, all those questions to be answered. So feel free to type it in and I will keep an eye on them and collect them as well. Yeah, you'll also receive a follow-up email with any resources and also the recording of this video. So feel free to respond back to that, as that is my email if you have any questions whatsoever. Without further ado, to introduce themselves, I will go ahead and pass it off to Mary Ellen and Nicole as well.
Hi, thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. As Nick said, my name is Mary Ellen Benson, and I'm currently the Vice President of Community Relations and Business Development at Myresiliencehelp. Myresiliencehelp is the new name for Aspen Point, and Aspen Point is a community mental health center that has been operating in El Paso County, Park and Teller County for close to 150 years now. And we've just recently gone through the name change, so I wanted to kind of give you guys some context for that. The presentation today is really going to focus a lot on grit and resilience, and I think Nicole's going to jump in and really do quite a bit of overview of that. But what we thought we wanted to do to kind of give context for how we got to this space around really trying to build a community of resilience and give kind of a journey or a story to you all as to how we got to this space kind of 1 year after we started looking at supports during the time of the pandemic. When we all went to kind of quarantine, and then we were in a virtual space, there were several of us in community leadership roles that were getting outreach about how are we going to help the community with supports in stress and anxiety and mental health challenges during COVID. And this really started, these conversations started probably in early April, so very, very early on. And it was with myself and then our executive director, Lori Jarvis at NAMI, and a couple other folks at the university. And we started having kind of a brainstorming session. And I think it was really at one point, we just stopped kind of trying to come up with quick solutions. And we decided to really pause and really try to figure out how do we, instead of trying to throw resources at something and try to do a quick fix, how do we start to build a tapestry of supports, if you will, that will be long lasting and long term for our community, long beyond COVID, but also knowing that COVID was probably going to be a long-term journey for all of us. And so at that time, we knew at Myresiliencehelp that we were going to be taking on the crisis counseling program, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. It's all over Colorado. It's tagged with Colorado Spirit, and it's initially funded through FEMA, but then operates now locally at the state level through CDPHE and local partners. And Myresiliencehelp has done this program historically in response to disasters. So we've had quite a few fires down here and some floods and different things. And while it's a really awesome program, you stand it up, it's temporary. You stand it up very quickly. It's got 3 to 4 folks who are designed to kind of reach out to a specific area of need, and then provide kind of ongoing interim immediate supports and needs. And then unfortunately, when folks start to realize that they really have challenges and they really have long-standing needs, the programs are already starting to wind down. And so we knew that there needed to be a broader avenue to kind of support people, because the needs for people during COVID recovery were going to be ongoing well beyond the pandemic. So at that time, in working with NAMI, and then we worked and reached out to the Institute for Resilience that Nicole is going to be speaking to from University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. We really started to try to brainstorm on how do we create a dynamic that meets people where they're at, and really it kind of dovetails on people's natural natural circles of influence, natural circles of connection, and really help people. Because the one thing that we realized was there was people didn't really know that they needed help. And then there are a lot of people who were like, what can we do? So as we started brainstorming that, we started saying, we've got this crisis counseling program. We've got ongoing peer supports through NAMI, which is the National Institute of Mental Illness, where peers kind of walk alongside folks that are going through their own journey with mental illness. And then we have this emerging GRIT program that has kind of come from Dr. Chip Benight's work, where he has come out of a lot of experiences on how to handle disaster works and respond to trauma during disasters. And our thought process was, if we can really come in and start to capitalize on people's willingness to help and building skills and strengths and language around resilience and strengths-based communication, and really helping folks reach out to those that they know in their own circles of familiarity, they can start to kind of reach out, and we can have that, if you will, it's kind of like you tell two people and they tell two people and so on and so on. And we felt like this concentric circles of kind of spread across the community. And then we worked with the GRIT program to link to the CCP, or the Crisis Counseling Program, when more professional supports are needed, or more comprehensive linkages into mental health supports are needed. And then the Crisis Counseling Program would also link into NAMI when there was more ongoing long-term needs that were identified. So it was really a new way to respond to a disaster, and it was a new way to capitalize on community resources that were already in play, that were free and available to the community, but sometimes the community isn't aware of it. So we knew no one entity could kind of tackle the challenges with COVID. So this was a real example of 3 different community entities coming together to say, how can we do this differently? And we've called it the El Paso County method, more just to kind of keep it framed where we can then start to create some, pull some data and create some framework to see if indeed this method is more effective in responding to disasters and long-term disasters, if you will, than kind of what traditional models have been in the past. So that's where we all got very linked in with the GRIT program. And the GRIT program has helped us all at any given time really strengthen our own resilience and really help those in our own families and our own communities. And so it's with great pleasure that I kind of give you that context and then pass it over to Nicole so she can give some more detail about GRIT and how GRIT may be a tool that can be supportive to you and to those in the communities that you serve, and ultimately give you a tool that will be long lasting, well beyond the reaches of COVID. So I will pass to Nicole.
Thanks so much, Mary Ellen. For Colorado Nonprofit Association for inviting us to talk with you today and have these conversations about not only what resources are available, but also what is resilience, how do we build that, how do we work with that. So as Nick and Mary Ellen both said, my name is Nicole Weis. I am the Peer Support Program Manager and a clinical therapist for the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience at University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. Similar to Diversus Health, we went through some name changes recently. So we also just launched our institute at the beginning of the pandemic. So we're a fairly new institute, but we've been with part of the university as a center for over a decade now. And our work is really to promote and bring resilience, self-care, some of that really self-empowerment to individuals who have experienced trauma or significant stress in their life. So when the pandemic happened, it was a shoe-in for how we can promote some of that into our community and really bring our community together. So I'll get into the GRIT program in just a few minutes, but first I wanted to kind of take a step back and just simply talk about resilience. It's been the buzzword of 2020. I think I literally saw an article that said, resilience is the word of 2020. I have no doubt it'll be the word of 2021 as well. But it's also become a word we've kind of thrown around without really taking a step into it and asking, what does resilience really mean for me? What does it mean for my community and my family? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, as well as how to build that up in yourself as well. So first of all, if we just take that step and say, what is resilience? What do we mean by that? We like to think that resilient people never feel stress, or that stress, trauma never impacts that person. It just bounces right off. And that's not true, because we're profoundly human, which means we're all going to experience stress at some point in our life. And stress in itself is not a bad thing. What's happened, however, is because of the chaos of the world, because of how difficult many people's lives are, we're feeling that stress on a very, very frequent basis. And unfortunately, our body just wasn't designed to do that. So instead, we work on this resilience. We work on this ability to bounce back. So in essence, resilience is the ability to return to what we would consider a pre-trauma or pre-stress state, which is how did our body physiologically function before that stress hit us. What we also know is, based on research, when individuals high in that level of resilience do bounce back, the more this happens, the easier it becomes to work through future hardships as well. So as devastating as this past year has been, and I can't believe we're even saying it's a whole year now, because we're coming up on the anniversary of COVID and when it really started to impact us, it's also forced us to really recognize, what does resilience mean for us and how do I build that in myself? So resilience also comes from that ability to successfully cope through an experience. It's not just the stress alone. It's not just the experience alone that simply creates that feeling for us. Instead, it's how we can effectively use resources around us. And this is where the GRIT program comes in, and tapping into resources like Myresiliencehelp and NAMI and all these other amazing community organizations we have. It's our ability to flexibly cope. So I'm probably speaking to the choir that, you know, the way we coped a year ago might not always cut it anymore. We needed different strategies. We need to flexibly work through some of that stress. And as well as actively managing our own personal distress. So acknowledging and respecting when we're having those days of anxiety, when we're having those days where things are just a little bit harder, and how do we then actively manage and work through that, whether that's our own coping, tapping into those resources, seeking out professional help, seeking out support, which again, where grit comes in as well. But how can we work through that ourselves? What's beautiful about resilience is it's also our ability to seek opportunities to help other people. So the more we help others, the more our own resilience grows, which I think is just this beautiful relationship that we get into. And then finally, resilience is the way we respond to those setbacks in our life, paired with that strong sense of self-efficacy, which is that voice inside that says, I can do this. I see this roadblock, this obstacle, this barrier, whatever is in front of me, and I believe in myself to get through it. Paired with our positive self-worth, right? So knowing that I'm worth it, I can get through this, right? So all of these pieces come together to create that sense of resilience. And resilience is not a one size fits all, right? There are different ways we look at resilience. There's different ways that people show resilience in themselves. So what we know is that resilient people tend to be pretty effective at identifying what they can control in their life, and develop those strategies to recognize and acknowledge the success as they do cope. Resilient people can thrive on turning stressors into challenges rather than view them as difficulties or threats. There's actually some interesting research that has come out that says the way we think about a challenge or a situation in front of us changes the way we can deal with that problem. So literally, if we look at a problem and we say, is this a challenge or a threat? And we choose to see it as a challenge, we're more likely to get through that. So having some of that positive or just a different way of thinking about the problems and stress in our life as well. Resilient people tend to have the confidence in their abilities to manage what's coming at them. So knowing that whatever come hell or high water, I'm going to face this. I'm going to try my best to work through it using the resources and coping skills I have available. Good at self-care, working through those emotional, physical challenges. Again, persevering when we hit roadblocks, and knowing that sometimes if we do fail, we turn that into an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to continue and try again. And then again, that beautiful relationship of helping other people cope, because as that says right there, collectively we'll succeed. Alone we might not, right? We are built to be social creatures. We're really built to support and work with one another. So this is all fine and dandy, right? How do we build our own resilience though, when we're exhausted? So it's been a year since the pandemic. And you're in a helping profession. Marielle and I are in helping professions. You know, we have these conversations with people on a daily basis. And then sometimes we get home and we're like, oh, I'm exhausted though. I'm exhausted because I've been helping and I've been extending myself and I've been working on other people's self-care. And oftentimes in those helping professions, our own self-care is the first thing to go, right? Because we're focused so much on the other people around us. So how do we take that step back and work on our own resilience when we're feeling that level of exhaustion? So some things you can do, in addition to the GRIT program, of course, is first of all, give yourself permission for that self-care, permission to take a break. It's okay. It's okay to take a vacation day. It's okay to take a wellness day or however else you might call that. It's okay to not answer your phone on the weekends. It's okay to have those boundaries and to say, right now, I just need to focus on myself, and that's okay. And also sometimes to offer forgiveness or grace to ourselves as well. Sometimes when we experience stress, we don't always experience it or work through it the way we wish we could, right? Maybe we've chosen, we're stressed out and then we binge on some, unhealthy food because that felt good in the moment. Or maybe, we're doing things that just aren't as healthy as they could be. And then we get really hard on ourselves. And then we get into this just really repetitive cycle. So sometimes just simply offer forgiveness and grace to yourself that we are in the middle of a pandemic that we didn't expect to be in, that we didn't know we'd be in a year later, that we don't know when it's going to end. So really help kind of reframe, keep things in perspective of the past year and what your experiences have been. One of the biggest things you can do in working through resilience is also simply focus on what you can control. When we're faced with stress, one of the biggest factors is the level of unknown, and our body does not deal very well with the unknown. Pandemic has been incredibly unknown for us. The future, how it's impacting us, the vaccine now, there's just so much unknown out in the world. When we focus instead on what we can control in our life, our brain can kind of ground down a little bit, can feel a little bit more focused, can feel a little bit more able to get through some of that stress. So focus on, what did I eat today? How did I move my body today? What kind of conversations with friends and family did I have today? Those are things I can control in a world where things feel a little uncontrollable. In doing that, you can also ask, what got you through stress in the past? And see, can you apply that to the future? Can you apply that to the current stressors that's going on? So most of us, almost all of us, I'd probably argue, have been through some level of stress, whether that was finishing school, getting married, having kids, going through even a traumatic experience. But we're all sitting here. So asking yourself, what got you through that? How did you push through during those stressful events? Was it talking to my family? Was it taking it one step at a time, one day at a time, using to-do lists or getting professional help during that moment? What got you through it in the past? Can you do that again now? Sometimes we simply forget or we don't think about, I've been through stress before. And while it's not the same stress I'm experiencing now, I might be able to take those experiences and use them now to work through my current stress. You can also choose to just focus on one thing a day. So maybe it feels overwhelming to think about eating healthy and exercising and taking care of my kids and, making sure I'm a helpful spouse or partner or whatever. And there's just all of these ands that build up. Take a step back. One thing, just focus on one thing today. Today, I'm going to eat healthy. Tomorrow, maybe I'll work on my exercise, but today, just going to focus on what I'm eating today. And again, it helps our brain kind of ground down into what feels a little bit more manageable and doable. With that, you can also keep a routine or a schedule when possible. As I said, keep those boundaries, especially when you kind of tend to overextend yourself a little bit. Keep the boundary of, I don't answer my email past 6 p.m. or I don't answer my email on the weekends, and that's okay, right? Practicing mindfulness, which is simply experiencing the moment as it comes, right? So without judgment, without ruminating, we simply experience what's out there and letting our mind just go to the next thing, right? Finding or remembering your purpose. So we're talking to Colorado Nonprofit Association. You guys are here because you have a purpose in your life. You have a drive, you have a passion. Sometimes we kind of lose that because the overwhelmingness of what's going on. So taking a step back, journaling or thinking or talking with a friend about why you're in this field. Why are you doing what you're doing? What is your purpose? And if that's kind of feeling a little lost right now, maybe asking yourself, well, what's bringing you joy right now then? At the end of the day, what makes you smile? What makes you happy? I was telling Mary Ellen and Nick today that I woke up to 5:30 in the morning to my dog throwing up. Great way to start my Friday. But at the end of the day, he's my dog. He brings me joy, right? And so, sometimes there comes that piece of joy with the frustration or with some of that as well. But at the end of the day, what makes you smile? Again, keeping things in perspective. And then finally, if we're encouraging other people to really work on self-care and resilience, we got to lead by example. We got to model that behavior. So if you're pushing the people around you to really focus on themselves, take a step back and ask what you're doing to focus on yourself at the same time. So as I said, that brings us into the Grit Resilience course, why we created this. So Dr. Charles Benight, he's our director of the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience. He has just this crazy, amazing brain, right? He's one of the lead researchers on self-efficacy. He's done a lot of work on this. And in March, literally, I think a week after the pandemic really started to impact Colorado, so we were on our first shutdown. Things were looking pretty serious. We had no idea what this was going to look like. He calls us, his staff here at the Institute, and said, I had a dream. Literally, I had a dream about how we can support the people around us. And in that thought, the Grit Resilience course came about. We were able to then launch the course. We created it with Dr. Benight, Dr. Joe Ruzek, who helped lead the National Center for PTSD. And for several years now, he works with us as a consulting basis. And then myself, so a few weeks after that original idea, the beginning of April, we launched the Grit Resilience course with the idea that we want to just simply show people how to support the other people in your community. You can find more information at letstalkgrit.com, by the way, if you're interested. So GRIT stands for Greater Resilience Information Toolkit. And again, it was created to help strengthen not only individual resiliency, but also equip the individuals who take the training to quote unquote coach the people in their social groups. And when I say social groups, that whoever's close to your heart, right? That might be your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers. But when you think of who's my community, that's who comes up for you for your social group. When we say coach, we don't necessarily mean a wellness coach or a health coach. We're saying when you think of who embodies a coach, think about the last good coach you had in your life, whether that was sports or wellness or a therapist or whoever, what qualities did that person embody? And that's what we ask the GRIT coaches who complete this program to embody as well. So typically when you think of a coach, you think about emotional support, you think about encouragement and motivation, reassurance, giving resources when needed, and that's what this toolkit provides. It's also grounded in the science of empowerment, but it's not meant to replace that professional help. So as Marilyn was talking, sharing with building us as a community, GRIT is a great starter for supporting other people. And then when you're in the moment of needing more professional help or knowing that somebody in your social group could use a little bit more professional help, tapping into those professional resources like Diversus Health or NAMI or any of the other organizations in your own community, right? So how do we build some of that resilience and encouragement and encourage people to get on that professional help if needed as well? So a little overview about what the Grit Resilience course provides. First of all, it is a completely free 5-hour in total training. It's self-paced. So as we worked through the training, we recorded it. These recordings are now available to anyone, everyone, whoever you are, wherever you are. And we broke them down into 5 one-hour modules. So you can really take it at your own pace, whether that's 20 minutes here and there, or the whole 5-hour training in one day. We currently have 4 tracks available, and we'll get to those in just a second. The course provides foundational information on what is disaster support, what do we know as proven research coming from disaster support, what is stress, disaster stress, what are the differences, resilience, again, how do we talk about resilience, what is it, self-efficacy, and then self-care as well, and then again, referring to that professional mental health support when needed. We provide 5 steps in how to reach out and make a meaningful and helpful conversation and connection. So while it might be simple to say, yeah, I'm just going to check in with my neighbor, right? What we're asking you to do is slow down, really check in with your neighbor. We've kind of gotten into this habit of checking in with each other. So if Mary Ellen was my coworker, we might check in the morning and say, hey, Mary Ellen, how are you doing? She says, oh, I'm doing fine. It's been a morning. Okay, great. And then we go on with our day, right? And that's become our norm. So what GRIT says is slow that conversation down. Ask, no, really, how are you doing? How did you sleep last night? What are you eating lately? Are you exercising? Are you moving your body? How are things truly going for you? taking that extra time and commitment to really have that meaningful conversation. We've just gotten away from that. So helping you slow down a little bit.
Nicole,
yes.
Could I add an example of how grit kind of helped us in the professional space to do exactly what you're describing? We were on a meeting of the different members of our team trying to kind of figure out how do we really support and reach out to the community. So we had some folks from NAMI, some folks from UCCS, Diversus Health, and we're again in a virtual space. And again, we were doing exactly what Nicole said. Hey, how you doing? Oh, we're doing fine. You know, the same type of thing. But you could kind of see in one person's eyes a little bit of a glaze, a little bit of like it maybe there was just something underneath that was maybe one blink away from a tear. And we were able to, because we had all gone through the grit training, kind of go through those questions to start to really prompt and just like, no, tell me really how you're doing, really, what is this, how are you? And we were able to get to the root of it right in the meeting, which made the meeting so much more connected and so much stronger as how we were going to continue to go on and protect and support and care for ourselves in the work that we were doing. And I'm not sure if we had not been connected with grit in our process, would we have really prompted that second question, third question, fourth question right in the middle of the meeting? So it was just a really powerful example that we kind of all lived through right in the moment.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's the intention, is slow down and ask those questions, right? We just live in such a fast-paced world, and we tend to be very busy and lead these busy lives. And sometimes we forget to slow down and really ask those questions. Thanks for sharing that. So we also showcase each of those steps. So as I said, 5 steps in reaching out, and then we show what does that actually sound like in a real conversation. We then encourage all the viewers who are watching those videos and training to pause or take some time after the training to practice that yourself as well. So you can understand, right, it's not muscle memory. You understand how it sounds when you actually do take a step back and say, ooh, how are you actually doing? Because I feel like something's coming up, right? We also include self-reflections for personal enhancement. So you can really think about how would the training apply in your own life, in your own community, in your own workforce. We talk about 6 key areas of strength to identify and encourage in others. So again, that's something that Mary Ellen mentioned as well, is how can we have a strength-based community? So we talk about what do those strengths look like. And then for each of the strengths, and I'll show you what those are in just a minute as well, we provide an appendix in our workbook that goes over tips and tricks for each of those areas as well. I'll also mention that with each track, you do get, or viewers do get, a workbook that has all the information from the training, plus a ton of resources, plus more self-reflections, more practice steps, things like that. So depending on the track you're in, it's between 50 and 70 pages of just information and helpful resources. And then finally, every Friday, we send out a weekly survey just to check in with our grit coaches, see how things are going. Is there any questions we can answer? Any situations that are coming up or challenges. We also started Friday Grit-togethers, which is a way for grit coaches to come together to talk about their experiences, share success stories, share challenges, get new resources, and above all, just connect as a community. And then we send out a monthly newsletter as well that shares more resources and what's kind of going on in the grit world. So as I mentioned, we currently have 4 tracks available. We started off simply providing the grit program. We also kind of refer to it as the grit community. It's just available to anyone, regardless of who you are, where you are, what you do in your life. And it talks about all of those core components that I mentioned in my previous slide. What we realized, though, as we were providing this training, is that there were other occupations and areas that really could use more focus, that needed more resources, that were really feeling stress. The first one that came up for us was our education community. So as we were seeing the fatigue that teachers were experiencing, the stress, the burnout, that level of emotional exhaustion of I'm trying so hard to support my students as I myself am struggling in the pandemic. So we partnered with Dr. Carolyn Gary, who also works at the university in our education department, to create Grit for Ed in May of 2020. And this one talks really about how do you support the education community and youth. So we talk about different signs and symptoms of stress to look at in different age ranges, how to have a conversation with a youth versus an adult, how to build a community of 3 around me within your school structure to talk about seeing some of that stress as a team, identifying some of the stress in kids with multiple people. So we looked at a lot of that and created the Grit for Ed program from there. And then during the summer, as the world was starting to transition back to work, if it was safe, or at least having those conversations and dealing with how do I have safe employees back at work, or how do I manage a virtual workforce that I was never prepared to manage, we created Grit Lead. So in this one, I partnered with our director of our Veteran Health and Trauma Clinic, and we created the Grit Leadership Program, which talks about how do leaders support themselves, right? As a leader in your organization. I'm sure Mary Ellen can speak to this one as well, but sometimes, again, your own self-care is the first thing to go because you're working so hard on making sure your staff is okay. So how can you support yourself as a leader? How can you then help your employees who are experiencing tremendous stress, especially if they're an essential employee and they didn't have the option to work from home? How do you talk about safety when people do come into your office, your organization, not wanting to follow the safety mandates? And then how to support small businesses who were feeling all of that stress and more. So created the Grit Lead program from there. And then finally, this fall, we got a lot of support from the Colorado Department of Public Health to create Grit for Health, which is centered very much on how do we support our healthcare workers. This includes our nurses, doctors, hospital, and healthcare administration, but also behavioral health, people who are working in the healthcare industry who don't typically get labeled as a healthcare worker, home health, and some of those other fields as well. So what are some of the particular stressors they might be experiencing, and how can we help support them? We also have plans to continue to adapt Grit. Our next plan hopefully is to come out with one for first responders and military and some of the experiences they're going through. We'd love to create a Grit for youth, and how can youth talk to other youth, right? Your friends to your friends, and some of that more youth-friendly language. And then our overall goal is to continue to adapt Grit to any future disaster. So while it was born from the pandemic, we also, all of those skills, everything we teach can absolutely be transferable to any significant stress or trauma. So in fact, we have a big Grit community in Texas. I was emailing with a few of them this week as well, because they're experiencing a record disaster in the middle of a pandemic as well. So knowing that in those types of situations, we can still support each other and use these skills to support our community then as well. So just briefly, I'll talk about some of the specific things we work through in the Grit program. The first is the principles of disaster support that I mentioned. So this is research shown 5 levels that when somebody does experience a disaster or significant stress, if we can help that individual focus on these 5 areas, that person's more likely to come through that stress a little easier and have that resilience and self-care after. So first, simply be in that personal sense of safety. Of course, that means physical safety, but it also means financial, mental health safety as well. So what are some of the components you can help somebody in maintaining that safety? How do we physically and mentally calm ourselves? Again, physical being our exercise, how we're moving our body, but also relaxation, mindfulness, meditation, some of the ways that we can come down from the stress response as well. Connection with others. So even if we think that we're a pretty solo person, we really like to go it on our own, we are social creatures. And at the end of the day, we need to connect with other people. And for the past year, that's looked very different. So how can we still connect with other people and maintain that social connection? Research has shown that time and time again, in the event of stress or trauma, social connection is one of the most powerful pieces to get us through. So how can we continue to maintain our network? Hope for the future, especially when the future feels really pretty dark or pretty unknown right now. This is, so I mentioned I'm a clinical therapist as well. I work with a couple of youth, and this is a big thing for our youth right now, our kids, is that sense of hopelessness for the future, right? Their world is so different, so changed. And because they do tend to think in the immediacy, hope for the future feels really difficult for them. So how can we help build that hope in what will, the fact that we will eventually return to a sense of normalcy, even if it wasn't the normal we knew 2 years ago. But how can we build that for ourselves as well? And then finally, that self and collective efficacy. So I mentioned self-efficacy, that's that voice inside us that says, I can do this, I can push through this, I can accomplish this goal. Collective efficacy is how the community comes together that says, we can do this. The most beautiful example of that was in the beginning of the pandemic, when the stress of the healthcare workers was first being recognized. And we were seeing people go out on their porches and banging pots and pans and cheering and singing for our healthcare workers. That's collective efficacy. That's that community voice that says, we believe in each other and we can get through this together. And that's what we hope the GRIT community will also do for your own communities. As I mentioned, we also provide those 6 key areas of strength and resilience. So these are several factors that might comprise our own self-care and wellness. And these sound like very simple things, but sometimes they kind of go by the wayside when we're experiencing stress or trauma. So first of all, just what are some positive mood improving activities? And sometimes we need a switch up of that. We need to change. One of my favorite activities to do with youth when I was working at Diversus Health, actually, when I worked at the crisis center there, is I would give our kids about 100 different coping skills or just positive activities that they could do. And we would go through and highlight which ones they were interested in, which ones to try. And what I loved about that exercise, it just showed that even though we tend to have some go-to mood improving activities like walking the dog or cooking breakfast, whatever that might be, there are hundreds and hundreds out there. So switching it up, looking at other ways to improve our mood when we're feeling pretty down. Social connections and support, and what are the different ways you can do that virtually right now? Healthy eating and drinking, sleep. So sleep usually across the board is the very first thing to go with stress, whether we start sleeping more, sleeping less, just sleeping really restlessly. But that's one way to really check in with somebody as well. Exercise, which can definitely be doing things like running or weightlifting or any of those other hardcore exercises, but it's also how are you moving your body throughout the day? This is also really important for individuals who are working from home because we do tend to be kind of rooted at our desk then. So how do you get up every few hours, move your body, go through your house, take a walk, whatever that might look like. And then finally, just relaxation. How do we engage the parasympathetic nervous system to come down from the stress response? As I mentioned, for each of these 6 areas, we talk about how do you ask those kinds of questions for whoever you're checking in with. And we provide an appendix for healthy tips and tricks for each of these 6 areas. So if you are talking to someone and they're saying, yeah, I just can't seem to sleep anymore, you can pull out that appendix and talk about, well, here's some sleep hygiene guidelines. What are some things that you can try? What are some things that maybe you're not doing right now, right? And then finally, we just pack GRIT with as many resources as we could think of that would be helpful and useful. And we continue in those monthly newsletters to share more as well. A lot of them tend to be technology-based because that's our world. So we talk about different apps for wellness, relaxation, meditation, exercise, different websites that exist for resources and resilience, some supportive online platforms that people can tap into, usually for free. We provide that appendix, and we even talk about podcasts and audiobooks you can listen to for stress and resilience training as well. One of those mental health platforms that I wanted to share with you all, because it is a free program, is Myresiliencehelp.com. This was another program that was created out of the University of Colorado Springs and has been heavily researched to show it is efficacious or effective in helping somebody manage experiencing trauma or significant stress. As the pandemic came out, they also updated this website to be a little bit more pandemic specific. And it has several different modules to choose from. So first of all, it's just how do you self-talk to yourself in a positive way and be your own best advocate? How do you seek out social support and connection, managing trauma triggers and memories, relaxation and coping? They provide different videos for progressive body relaxation, mindful breathing, things like that. Unhelpful ways of coping, which tend to be anger, substance use, and isolation. And how can you recognize that in yourself and work on something different? And then my favorite module is seeking that professional help. So if you are having a conversation with somebody, or you're kind of recognizing in yourself that you could use some professional help, this is a great module to work through. It talks about what does professional mental health look like? What kind of questions can you ask when you're reaching out to a therapist? What different modalities exist? and how to then find a therapist in your area as well. So it's a really cool module. And I just wanted to mention our grit.uccs.edu website. We've got a few resources on here as well. First, we have resilience and wellness resources for different occupations and populations. We also have a Keys to Grit video cast series involving interviews and conversations with mental health professionals in our area that focus on wellness and resilience. Some of those topics include grief and loss, spirituality, helping our elder community, so conversations like that. Access to SilverCloud, which is another online mental health platform. And then it's one of the ways to sign up for the Grit Resilience course. The other way, as I mentioned, is letstalkgrit.com. Letstalkgrit.com is a really neat website because it also has videos of real grit coaches who have taken the training and have really applied it to their own life and their own experiences. One of my favorite videos is from a woman named Latrina Ollie. She is one of our grit coaches here in El Paso County, and she used grit to connect really well with her teenager who was going through a little bit of depression at the time. So she shares her story and how she worked through that and worked in her family. So grit.uccs.edu, a couple of resources there as well. So that brings us to the end of the bulk of the presentation and just the information we wanted to share. But now we wanted to really open it up for any conversation about resilience, the CCP program, anything we're doing at Diversus Health or the Institute, as well as we can talk a little bit about what NAMI can provide as well, although they weren't able to be here on the panel for us today. So Nick, I'll go ahead and kind of pass it on to you if there are any questions. Mary Ellen and I are happy to work through those.
Thank you so much, Nicole, Mary Ellen. Thank you so much for presenting. This was great. This is also an amazing time too to be able to ask any questions that you have. So please feel free to come off of mute if you'd like, or if you'd rather, you can type it into the chat and I can relay that question. But yeah, again, now's a great time to ask away. So we'll give you a second here to collect your thoughts with that.
Good morning, Nicole and Mary Ellen. This is Amber. How are you?
Good, Amber. It's so great to finally meet you.
It's really wonderful to have you here. And as you know, Nicole, we were talking before this session. A lot of the folks that are here today are from other parts of the state of Colorado, and I'm just wondering if I don't know if I think you both have done a wonderful presentation in letting people know that these resources are available for anyone. And I'm wondering if there are certain ways that these folks can think about connecting what they've learned from you all today and applying that in their communities.
Yeah, great question. So, right, so while Marianne and I are based in El Paso County, these resources are for anybody. So we have grit coaches, excuse me, we have over 2,200 grit coaches in 42 different states and 8 different countries. So it truly is worldwide at this point. Anybody can tap into these resources and share and work through them. And I know Diversus Health has also done some resiliency series and things like that that are also available. So you can absolutely use this for however you think it fits in your own community. And as I said, it's self-paced and self-recorded, so anybody can watch and tap into it. I think it's a really great way to start some conversations as well, especially within your organization. So we've had several organizations as a whole take the training, and then they go together in staff meetings and other kind of get-togethers and talk about what they learned, how can they apply it in their own life, in their own community, working through some of the self-reflections as a group, as a whole. So I think it's a great way to kind of connect as an organization as well. And it sounds like you guys kind of did that day as well.
Yeah, I would add to that, just really to echo on for the grit piece of it, because again, we're starting at, what can we do for ourselves and to help those in our circles of, connection first, before we go to like the higher levels of connection that are necessary from a professional standpoint. So I do think we have gone into several different local nonprofits and just done some overarching training and then connected them to the Let's Talk Grit website, and then gone back and just said, hey, can we work with you? Do you need additional information? Do you need more on site? I guess it's really virtual, but information that we can provide. But so I think that's been a really great place to go on the grit lead, and then to be able to bring that into the organizations. Several organizations kind of added it to their own kind of onboarding and training program for staff. And they actually also were able to start to build in time in their day to take the modules. So it wasn't like an added on thing, that was actually something that, that was like extra. And then some organizations, I know at Diversus Health, we have put into people's schedules twice a week a calm time that we built right into people's schedules twice a week, where people can either go to the Calm app or Myresilience app, or they can just sit or stretch or whatever it is that they need to do. So those are a couple of things from just like pure kind of self-care, helping give strength and kind of a language and a framework for organizations. But I was looking while Nicole was speaking. So I mentioned the Colorado Spirit, which is the statewide crisis counseling program for COVID recovery. And I'll put it in the chat, but it's overseen by CDPHE, and there are several different crisis counseling programs in pretty much all across the state. Some are connected to mental health centers, some are connected to other organizations. I know Servicio de la Raza has a CCP that they're building, so they're all over the state. And I'll put that on the chat, because if people are wanting to get more, a little bit more than just grit, they're wanting to actually get some crisis outreach folks to come into their organizations to do training, to provide, short kind of strengths-based, several different sessions individually or as a group, that's available. And that's all free for folks. So again, I want anyone around the state to be able to have that as a resource as well. And most of those organizations have online presence. They also have, hotlines, different things where you can reach into those as well.
I'll add to that too, of that leading by example, right? So Diversus Health is doing such a beautiful job with that by giving these calm hours. That's what we mean by that, lead by example. If you want your employees, your organization, your community to really work on resilience and self-care, we need to be able to give them that opportunity to show, to do that and show them that it's a priority for you.
I'm putting that in the chat right now.
I will also, I'll send this slide deck to Amber and Nick, and I will also include some flyers for GRIT. So feel free to use those flyers and pass them around your own organization or community as well.
So Amber, did we get to your question? I want to make sure we provided enough insight for that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love
Okay.
the sort of enhanced information you gave for people to think even wider of different ways that they can utilize this pretty quickly in their organizations. I love integrating this into onboarding. That is an amazing idea.
Yeah, that's Diversus has been really key in trying to make sure that we're bringing in the pieces of onboarding. We've also added, I mentioned the the onboarding or the Calm app time, but we've also added yoga, CBT yoga, or cognitive behavioral therapy yoga, where we've had that available for folks to build into their schedule, and we've facilitated that for folks during the day. And again, that's been another avenue to just have some self-care and have the ability for staff to kind of reflect and also create community. So again, if you're creating community in these different spaces and people have some of the skills to be able to say, how are you doing? No, how are you really doing? Then you're kind of hitting all things at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I know Nick will ask this, but I'll just jump in and just let any of you know if there's any specific questions you have that you can think of while we have Nicole and Mary Ellen here related to the work that you do and how you might be able to integrate this, or if they've seen it like your programs, or even any ideas you have that you might want to bounce off them while we have this precious time with them. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions or put it in the chat.
I also just want to thank you guys for tuning in today as well. I think these are really, really important conversations to have, and just the fact that you are interested in wanting to see how can I apply that to my own organization, I think is such a beautiful silver lining, if we can even call it that, of the past year, is we are taking that step to look at our employees, our community, and asking, you know, what else can we do? Because we are, I think as a whole, exhausted. And so having that priority of, you know, normalizing that experience and having the priority of creating that community of self-care and wellness, I think is incredibly important. I think something we can at least take away from the stress of the past year. I don't know that we would have had these conversations a year ago.
Yeah. And it's probably been needed in the workspace for a long time. So I really appreciate you saying that. I just wanted to comment on Cynthia's comment about the research. I think she said the research, all of this, and share it. It's important and needed. It would be helpful for medical centers to incorporate, you know, for their employees. So totally agree. And I think, you know, Chip and I, and again, Lori Jarvis, when we came together, one of our key visions for this was disaster response has been done a certain way traditionally for years upon years upon years upon years. And it's been this stand up this temporary team, get it out there, start, you know, reaching out to folks, let them know it's a resource. And again, like I said, once people start to realize that they need some supports, those like resources are no longer there. And so our hope is that by threading together different resources and meeting people where they're at and capitalizing on the strengths of the people in the community and in tandem, that we can start to tell a different story so that when these disasters do happen, we're able to give a framework or a model to other communities to say, it's not just this one way. It needs to be more of a tapestry across the different resources, and how do you link and connect people across different resources. You know, we're talking about mental health and self-care and self-efficacy and all those sorts of pieces, but a lot of the things that come up, and I'm sure in Texas, this is a big one, is, you know, how do we get to food, and how do we get to water, and how do we get, you know, different things. And so we have had so much connection through this platform because we're talking about meeting people where they're at, that we've been able to learn how to connect people to those types of resources as well.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on that, again, while this was born out of the pandemic and while we're having these conversations because of the impact of the pandemic, we will always face disasters. We will always face stress. And so having these skills and just having that repertoire can then transfer to some of the future stress we're inevitably going to experience, whether that's, you know, natural disasters, the blizzards, the floods. Colorado is pretty big for the fires and floods because of the fire burn scars. But we can continue to come together as a community in those events as well. And the more we have these conversations, the easier it is to regroup that and share those resources again and again.
Yeah, I think that it's like one of those, like, if you're going to find silver linings in all of the upheaval of last year, this has been one of those incredible necessary things that just got forced to like really come to fruition in a way that we'll be able to keep leveraging from here on out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank both of you so much for being here. I just think that one of the things Colorado Nonprofit Association really wants to focus on in 2021 is meaningful self-care. So there's so many things that are like, you know, spa days and take a hot bath, whatever. But considering all the folks that we're working with who are working the front lines of nonprofit sector across the state, there are people, like you said, Nicole and Mary Ellen, that are just exhausted and burning out. And we want to make sure that everything we're putting in front of them, that they take their time to learn from, is really meaningful for them and the people that they care about in work and in their personal lives. So this is a great tool and resource. And I'm just so grateful that you all took the time to be here with us this morning.
Thank you so much. We're so happy and we feel really honored that you wanted to bring us into your group. So thank you for that.
And like I said, I'll share the slide deck. So if there are any questions as you're kind of ruminating on all of this, feel free to reach out to us at any time.
Absolutely.
Include my email in there. I'm happy to bring these conversations to your own organization or workforce as well. And again, I'll share some flyers as well for anybody to pass out and share within their community.
Amber, and you have the Let's Talk Grit website and all that information. Okay, great, great.
And again, just as a, oh, go ahead, Nicole.
I just saw Kylie's comment here with suicide prevention. We also just presented this to Pueblo suicide prevention as well and had some amazing conversations with that. So I think you could absolutely bring that into your connection as well.
Yeah, I would echo that. We brought out this model and this connection into all of the suicide prevention work groups and coalitions that we have kind of in our Tri-County area. And again, it was really focused on like, what can you do now for people? Let's get upstream of the challenges that people are having that bring and help, you know, social connection is one of the greatest protective factors for people. And so how do we kind of get that word out as quickly as we can? And it was a different way to look at suicide prevention. So I think Kylie, those comments were really, really spot on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when Nick sends out the recording, of course, all of you are strongly encouraged to share it with whoever you want. For us, and I'm sure for Nicole and Mary Ellen, like getting the word out is the most important part right now that this exists. So please feel free to share with anyone you want.
Yep. And again, all the grit resources and then all the resources on Colorado Spirit, and I put that information in the chat, that is a statewide network. They're all free right now. So again, we want this to be as least burdensome for people as possible.
It's all about just coming together.
For sure.
You can talk, Nick.
No, you guys are great. I do want to, kind of reiterate, I'll be following up with all that information as well. So feel free, we'll have all the contact information in there as well in the email, so you can respond back to that or just respond to me if you have any questions at all. But I do want to thank Mary Ellen and Nicole. Thank you so much for presenting today. This information is incredibly important and it's really great to hear also. So thank you for doing this and for presenting for us today, and for everyone who joined us as well. It was great to see all of you, and thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation. So yeah, I want to say, if there are no other questions, to have a great Friday, a great rest of your weekend, and we'll be following up. I'll send that out today.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Thanks so much.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.